Welcome back to the deep dive. You know, if you're like most language learners, you probably think fluency means hard work, right? Late nights, flashcards, grammar drills, maybe that classroom pressure cooker feeling.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
That whole cycle of stress, memorization, and then you just feel, well, exhausted.
Right,
It feels like pushing a rock uphill constantly.
right. Well, today we're kind of tearing up that rule book. We're doing a deep dive into something pretty different. An approach that suggests maybe the best way to master English isn't through all that effort, but actually through tranquility. Maybe even while you sleep.
Exactly. We're looking at sources detailing this system. It's called Sleepytime Stories, English immersion through tranquil narratives. And it's not just, putting on some background noise. This is designed, engineered, really.
Okay, so our mission here is to unpack how that works. How do these stories, these reimagined stories use, like calm audio and specific language tricks to train your ear, and apparently lower stress and help you reach fluency with?
Well, the sources say minimal conscious effort. That's the claim.
Yeah, and what's really fascinating, I think, is the core idea that resting, being relaxed, is actually the method of learning. It sort of turns our usual ideas about adult language learning on their head, doesn't it? We usually think we need to be super focused, hyper alert.
Totally. It promises this way to kind of relax your mind, but at the same time, tune your ear into the real rhythm and sound of English. So if you've ever felt just overwhelmed by vocabulary lists or tricky grammar, this seems to offer, well, an escape almost into listening.
And the system organizes this under the banner of Dreamscape Narratives. That term itself tells you a lot, right? It's mixing English learning with deep calm. The whole point is creating this safe, predictable sound environment for your brain.
Okay, that brings us to a big question then. How do you take something like, say, Peter Pan full of adventure and turn it into a sleep aid? Because these aren't news stories they've made up, they're using classics everyone knows.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And they lean heavily on stories that are already sort of embedded in our collective minds.
Yeah.
Peter Pan, Alice in Wonderland, The Little Prince. But that familiarity, it's actually a tool. The sources are clear. The stories are slowed way down, sometimes by like 40%.
But wait a second, if I already know Peter Pan's story, won't I just zone out if it's super slow? Doesn't familiarity sometimes just lead to boredom?
That's a really fair point. But the goal isn't remembering the plot points. It's absorbing the structure, the language itself. The really key difference is they deliberately shift the focus. It's not about the adventure or the fighting anymore. It's much more about reflection, sensory details, feelings. Since you already kind of know the basic story arc, your brain doesn't have to work so hard figuring out what happens next.
Okay, so instead of using brain power on predicting the plot, that energy can go towards just passively noticing the language patterns?
Exactly. And you see this right away in how these start the stories.
Yeah.
Think about the feeling it creates. Instead of that urgent, once upon a time, the tone is set immediately for calm. Phrases like, once in a quiet moment between dreams and dawn, that completely changes how you relate to the language. You're not expecting action, you're settling into stillness.
Yeah, that really highlights the whole philosophy shift, doesn't it? The sources say the sentences are, and I'm quoting here, carefully chosen to help your mind rest while your English improves naturally. And they have that great little motto, listening, not studying, feeling, not forcing.
And that feeling not forcing part, that's so important. It basically gives you permission to switch off that part of your brain that's always trying to translate everything. You're meant to just soak in the rhythm of English without that pressure of needing to understand every single word instantly in your own language.
Okay, the philosophy sounds good, it's very appealing, but we need to know, what are the actual linguistic tricks they're using here? Because if this is supposed to lead to fluency, it has to be more than just a slow story, right? We need to look at the mechanics. How does it help you absorb the rhythm, the flow of English? That's often the hardest part for adult learners.
Right. It really comes down to specific auditory training. The sources give a really good case study looking at Peter Pan Reimagined, The Star Whisperer, and the contrast is just, it's huge. It goes from this rowdy adventure story to something almost meditative.
So in the original story, Peter's all action, shouting, fighting pirates, flying around like crazy. What's he doing in this version?
Well, in this Dreamscape version, the scene is totally different. Peter's described as sitting quietly on the edge of the cloud, looking down at London's sleeping lights. He's not off chasing Captain Hook. Instead, it says he was listening to the stars. And the story paints this picture of each star having its own sound, maybe like it whispers a wish from a dreaming child below. The focus is all on quiet, guidance, connection.
Wow, okay. That shift in focus is pretty clever. But let's zoom in even closer. on the actual words they use, the linguistic craft. The sources mention they intentionally use certain sounds for a calming effect, right? Beyond just what the words mean.
Yes, exactly. They point out how often soft S sounds appear those sibilants. In just that little bit I mentioned, you have sleeping, stars, small, shine. The analysis calls these sounds soothing both in meaning and in sound. They create this whole acoustic feeling of calm.
That's a neat example of using phonetics, the sounds themselves. But what about bigger picture stuff, like sentence structure, rhythm, beyond just soft sounds?
Yeah, that's where it gets maybe even more interesting. They use that slow pace to really highlight the prosody, the music of English. This covers things like intonation, the way sentences naturally rise and fall in pitch. When you're relaxed, your brain apparently starts tracking these things better, like where native speakers pause naturally, where they put stress in a sentence, the sort of musical feel of common phrases.
So you're absorbing the sentence's architecture, not just the individual word bricks.
That's a great way to put it. And they embed common, useful English phrases, transitional things like, "It seemed to me that," or "After a quiet moment he decided." These are the little bits of glue native speakers use all the time, but they're really hard to teach with grammar rules alone. By hearing them slowly, calmly, over and over, you absorb them as whole rhythmic units, ready to use later without thinking too hard.
Right, so the lesson isn't just learn this word, it's more about noticing how the words feel, how they sound together. You're training your ear, even if you're not actively translating.
Yeah. It's basically rewiring your auditory system to associate English not with classroom stress or fear of mistakes, but with feeling safe and rhythmically comfortable.
Okay, this leads us perfectly into the science bit, because this isn't just about feeling relaxed. It's linking language learning directly to our body, our physiology. But let me push back a little here. If your brain is winding down for sleep, isn't it more likely to just filter out this language input as noise? Is it really learning?
That's the crucial question, and the sources tackle it directly. The relaxation isn't just a nice side effect. It's apparently a necessary precondition for this type of learning. Listening to these calm, steady narratives does specific things physiologically. It measurably lowers your heart rate. And really importantly, it helps your brain release serotonin.
Serotonin. Okay, why is that important here? I mean, it makes you feel good, but for learning.
Well, serotonin is key for mood, obviously, but it also plays a big role in memory consolidation. So by pairing English exposure with this calm, serotonin-boosted state, the brain apparently flags that input as non-threatening, safe. And that makes it easier to shuttle those language patterns into your long-term memory.
Huh. So the calm state actually optimizes the brain for absorbing these complex patterns we were just talking about, which seems like the total opposite of that high-pressure, critical way most of us try to learn as adults.
It really is the antithesis of forcing it, of effortful study. What happens in this relaxed state is you manage to bypass something called the critical filter.
The critical filter. Okay, can you unpack that a bit? Our listeners probably know the term, but how does it play out specifically in adult learning?
Sure. The critical filter Krashen talks about this a lot. It's basically like our internal editor or gatekeeper. It's that self-conscious part of our brain that's always judging, translating, worrying about mistakes. It can really inhibit us from just processing language naturally, let alone speaking freely. And for adults, that filter is often working overtime, blocking the kind of natural acquisition kids do so easily.
Right, that self-judgment, that's what makes us mentally translate every word and slows everything down.
Precisely. So by getting into this deep, calm state, you essentially lower the drawbridge on that filter. You turn off the internal editor temporarily, you stop translating and judging so much, and you're just, as the motto says, feeling the flow. Which is much closer to how kids learn, isn't it? They hear patterns, they feel the rhythm, they imitate, they speak without that constant fear of getting it wrong, long before they know what a verb is.
So the instruction they give to just let go of the pressure to learn and let the words wash over you, it's not just feel-good advice, it's actually based on this science.
Exactly. Because as the sources wrap up, you are learning, even when you're resting.
It sort of redefines passive listening then. You're swapping that mental exhaustion of trying too hard for a really efficient passive absorption method, one that specifically targets and quiets down those mental blocks that trip up so many adult learners. Okay, so this whole deep dive into these Dreamscape narratives, it really shows this fascinating mix of psychology, language mechanics, and just peace. It seems like a genuinely powerful alternative for anyone who's felt stuck or stressed out by the usual ways of learning English.
Yeah, I think we can definitely say the core idea holds up based on these sources.
Yeah.
Every word you listen to in that calm, receptive state is moving you closer to fluency.
Yeah.
That listening time, even if you drift off, isn't wasted downtime. It's actually prime learning time, optimized by your own physiology.
So here's the final thought to chew on. If this suggests that the most effective language learning happens when your mind is relaxed, open, not stressed about studying, when that critical filter is down and your brain is happily storing information because it feels safe, then what crucial role does tranquility play in achieving mastery in anything, maybe that we usually ignore in our typical high-stress learning habits? Something to think about next time you feel that pressure to just cram harder.
Definitely something to reflect on. Until next time, keep diving deep.